"Get on your knees, woman. You people never learn." The shout cracked through the quiet street like a gunshot. A white officer, jaw tight, finger trembling with fury, towered over a black woman in a white blazer kneeling on the asphalt. Sunlight caught the sweat on his face. Sirens painted the scene red and blue, and neighbors stood frozen at their driveways, phones half raised but hearts unsure. She did not cry. She did not beg. She just stared straight ahead, calm as stone. And that calm, that quiet defiance was what terrified him most. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we are glad you are here. Now, back to Elena Brooks. When the officer yelled again, even the wind seemed to stop. Elena's palms pressed against the rough pavement, cool against her skin. Two more patrol cars rolled up, doors slamming, boots heavy on the ground. One young female officer hesitated, eyes flicking between protocol and conscience. Another man whispered, "Is this being recorded?" The first officer smirked, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Go ahead, film it. No one cares when they resist." But she had not resisted. Her ID sat in the car, registration clean, plates registered to her name. None of that mattered. To them, she was just another black body they could control, another lesson to make public. The crowd was growing now, mothers holding their children, an older man shaking his head, a teenage boy whispering, "Why is she on the ground?" Elena lifted her chin slightly, voice steady. "You have made a mistake." The officer laughed, harsh and mocking. "Mistake? Lady, the only mistake here is thinking your kind can drive through this neighborhood without permission." Something in the air shifted. For the first time, the onlookers heard the violence inside those words, the kind that never needed a gun to wound. And somewhere behind the flashing lights, a quiet storm began to move toward them, one that would soon remind everyone on that street exactly who Elena Brooks really was. The young female officer stepped forward, her voice thin against the weight of sirens. "Sir, she is not resisting." The words trembled in the air, but Officer Grant snapped before she could finish. "Step back, rookie. Watch and learn how to handle them." He emphasized that last word as if it carried centuries of permission. The crowd murmured. A child asked quietly, "Mom, why is he yelling at her?" The mother pulled him closer and whispered, "Just watch, honey." Elena Brooks did not move. The sun beat against the pavement, heat rising like smoke around her. Her hands rested steady on her knees, wrists red from the grip of metal cuffs. Her voice, calm and deep, carried through the noise. "You are making a mistake," she said again. Grant crouched near her, breath sharp with authority. "Mistake? The mistake is thinking you can drive a car like that through a neighborhood like this." He smirked, looking around for approval that never came. A teenage boy held his phone higher, filming every second. A man beside him muttered, "Someone has to post this." Across the street, an elderly woman whispered, "That woman looks military." Nobody answered. A hush fell for a moment before another officer, nervous and pale, asked, "Should we check her ID again?" Grant barked back, "She does not need an ID when she is going to jail." Then came a sound that silenced the crowd. A quiet click. Elena had turned her wrist slightly, tapping the side of her smartwatch. A small light blinked once, then again. No one noticed except the young female officer, whose eyes widened. She knew that signal. It was an encrypted distress code used only by federal personnel. Grant leaned closer, still unaware. "Say something, lady. Beg a little. It might help your case." Elena looked up slowly, her gaze sharp enough to cut through the heat. "You will want to remember this moment," she said. "Every second of it." Somewhere miles away, in a secure military office, a screen lit up red. "Colonel E. Brooks. Emergency signal confirmed." Two soldiers exchanged glances. "She pressed it," one said quietly. "Activate response." Back on the street, the tension thickened. The wind shifted. Distantly, the faint hum of an approaching vehicle grew louder. Grant straightened, irritated by the sound. "What now?" he muttered. The young officer swallowed hard. "Sir, I think help is coming." Elena's lips curved just slightly, not a smile, but the beginning of control returning to her hands. She looked up at the officer who still thought he held power and said, "I told you, you made a mistake." "Oh." The sound grew louder until it cut through the sirens completely. A deep mechanical hum measured, commanding, unmistakable. Down the road, a dark green military jeep turned the corner, its headlights steady in the midday glare. The crowd shifted, sensing the gravity before they understood it. Officer Grant's hand hovered near his holster, nerves flashing across his face. "Who called backup?" he barked. No one answered. The jeep stopped 10 yards away. The driver's door opened, and a man in full uniform stepped out. His boots struck the pavement with the kind of weight that quiets chaos. He scanned the scene once, then locked eyes on the kneeling woman. "Colonel Brooks," he said firmly. "Are you unharmed, ma'am?" The crowd gasped. The word colonel carried like thunder. Grant froze. His voice stumbled. "Colonel, what did you just call her?" The officer ignored him completely, approaching Elena with precision and respect. He removed his cap, lowered his tone. "Ma'am, the base received your signal. Response protocol initiated." Elena slowly stood, her movements deliberate. The sun caught the edge of her watch, now blinking green instead of red. She brushed the dust from her blazer, turned toward Grant, and spoke softly. "You wanted control. Now watch what it really looks like." Grant tried to recover authority, his words shaking. "This is a police matter. You have no jurisdiction here." The soldier's eyes hardened. "Correction. You just assaulted a senior officer of the United States Army in public view. You have no jurisdiction here." People began recording openly now. The young female officer who had hesitated earlier stepped forward, voice trembling but clear. "Sir, I tried to tell you." She never resisted. She was calm the entire time. Grant's jaw tightened. "Turn off those cameras," he shouted, but the crowd did not listen. Elena faced him fully, her posture regal and still. "You told me to kneel," she said. "You told me that people like me do not belong here. I am here to remind you that we built this country, we protect it, and we outrank your hate." The soldier beside her lifted his radio. "Command, this is Lieutenant Reeves. Confirm identity of Colonel Elena Brooks. Initiate accountability procedure for local law enforcement." The reply came crackling through. "Confirmed. Proceed." "Oh," Grant's face drained of color. "This cannot be happening," he muttered. Elena stepped closer until her shadow fell across his badge. "It is happening," she said. "And every second is being recorded by the people you thought were beneath you." Phones were raised high. The silence was electric. For the first time, Officer Grant looked small, his authority melting under the weight of truth. And on that ordinary American street, a quiet woman in white stood taller than any uniform around her. Officer Grant's voice cracked under the pressure. "Everyone, stand down. This is obstruction." But no one moved. The young female officer lowered her weapon first, then the others followed. Only Grant remained rigid, sweat beading down his temple. Elena Brooks stood opposite him, the cuffs still on her wrists. She raised them slightly, the metal glinting beneath the sunlight. "You wanted proof of control," she said calmly. "Now you are the one in restraints." Lieutenant Reeves nodded once and stepped closer. "Ma'am, permission to remove the cuffs?" Elena gave a simple nod. Reeves produced a key, unlocked the steel bracelets, and caught them in his hand before they could hit the pavement. The sound of metal against his glove was sharp, final. The crowd murmured. Some clapped softly, unable to help themselves. Grant took a step back, voice trembling. "You cannot just walk in here and take over. You are not law enforcement." Reeves turned toward him, posture solid as stone. "You are mistaken, officer. Federal jurisdiction supersedes local when a United States military officer is unlawfully detained. You made that happen." Grant's face flushed red, but before he could speak again, Elena did. "You did not see a citizen," she said evenly. "You saw a stereotype. You did not ask questions. You assumed guilt." She paused, letting each word land like a verdict. "And that is exactly why you do not deserve the badge you wear." The young female officer stepped forward hesitantly. "Colonel Brooks, I am sorry. I tried to stop it." Elena looked at her, expression softening. "You did something braver," she said. "You spoke up when silence was safer." The officer swallowed hard, eyes shining, and nodded. From the crowd, voices began to rise, some angry, some relieved, some in tears. "About time," a man said loudly. "This has to change." A woman added, "That could have been my daughter." The energy shifted. The fear that had filled the air turned into something else, accountability. Elena turned back to Grant, who was now visibly shaking. "Officer Grant, You are hereby ordered to remain on site until Internal Affairs arrives, Reeves said flatly. Grant barked a bitter laugh. You think you can ruin my career with one phone call? Elena met his gaze without blinking. Not one call, she said. Several. Reeves raised his radio again. Command, this is Lieutenant Reeves. Confirm that the footage feed has been secured. The response came through instantly. Affirmative. Multiple live streams confirmed. Headquarters monitoring. Grant's shoulders sagged. The weight of what he had done finally began to settle. Elena stepped closer, her voice quiet but piercing. You told me to kneel, Officer Grant. But the truth is, I never had to, because every time justice stands, men like you fall. The crowd erupted cheers, tears, applause mixing with the hum of distant sirens and the crackle of Reeves's radio. For a brief moment, the whole street felt suspended in truth. Elena Brooks stood in the center of it all, no longer just a woman wronged, but a symbol of calm authority reclaimed. The moment felt endless. The heat shimmered off the pavement, wrapping the scene in a strange stillness. Officer Grant's breathing grew shallow, his hand twitching near his belt as if grasping for authority he no longer had. Lieutenant Reeves stepped in front of Elena Brooks, steady and deliberate. Do not reach for anything, he warned. Grant froze, eyes darting toward the watching crowd. The same people who once stood silent were now witnesses. Their phones captured every breath, every flicker of fear on his face. Elena took a slow step forward. You thought this was about power, she said. It never was. It was about dignity. Her tone was soft, but it carried through the heavy air, calm slicing sharper than anger ever could. Reeves motioned to two local officers who had hung back uncertainly. Escort Officer Grant to his vehicle. He is suspended pending investigation. They hesitated only a moment before obeying. The chain of command had quietly shifted, and everyone knew it. Grant protested as they led him away. This is not over. I was following protocol. Elena turned her head slightly, her gaze steady. Protocol does not excuse prejudice, she said. The words struck harder than any order. As Grant was guided to his cruiser, the young female officer approached again, her face pale but determined. Ma'am, she said quietly, the department will try to bury this. They will say it was a misunderstanding. Elena nodded once. Then make sure your truth is louder. The officer took a deep breath and saluted. It was not regulation, but it was respect. From across the street, a young man who had filmed everything shouted, Colonel Brooks, we got your back! The crowd echoed him, a wave of voices rising against the hum of engines and radios. For a moment it felt like the street itself had found its voice. Reeves turned to Elena. Command is requesting a full report, ma'am. Do you wish to return to base? She looked around the flashing lights, the broken pride, the faces that had seen both cruelty and courage. Not yet, she said. There is something left to say. She stepped closer to the onlookers. Record this part too, she said firmly. Dozens of screens lifted toward her. The air thickened again, but this time it carried focus instead of fear. What happened here was not new, she continued. It is what happens when judgment outruns truth, when uniforms forget the people they swore to protect. A woman in the crowd whispered, She is speaking for all of us. Elena's voice stayed low but unwavering. I do not want revenge, she said. I want reflection. Because justice is not loud, it is precise. The young officer beside her lowered her head, whispering, Thank you, ma'am. Elena placed a hand briefly on her shoulder. No, she said. Thank you for seeing me before the world did. The sound of the crowd's applause rose once more, steady and deep. The cameras kept rolling, not for spectacle, but for truth. In that quiet American street, where arrogance had turned to humility, Colonel Elena Brooks stood tall, a living reminder that real power does not demand the world to kneel. It simply stands until the world remembers how to rise. The crowd began to thin as emergency lights dimmed, but the atmosphere stayed charged. Reporters arrived, microphones extended, voices overlapping in the thick summer air. Colonel Brooks, how do you feel right now? One shouted. Another asked, Do you plan to press charges? Elena Brooks did not answer immediately. Her gaze was fixed on the spot where she had been forced to kneel just minutes earlier. The shape of her knees was still faintly marked in the dust. She stepped toward it slowly, the sound of her heels clicking steady against the pavement. I feel what every black woman feels when the world forgets her humanity, she said finally. Her voice was even, carrying through the open street. But I also feel what every soldier feels when duty demands silence. I chose silence until it was no longer strength but surrender. The reporters fell quiet. No one dared interrupt. Lieutenant Reeves stood behind her, posture firm but protective. Command confirmed the footage is being archived for review, he said quietly. It will not disappear. Elena nodded once. Good. Let it be studied. Let them see what justice looks like before it is cleaned up for headlines. From a distance, a young man still filming whispered to his phone. She is rewriting the meaning of calm. The live-stream chat scrolled endlessly with hearts, fists, and words of solidarity. Someone commented, she did not raise her voice, and the world heard anyway. Elena turned toward the remaining onlookers, her eyes sweeping the scene. Every time something like this happens, we ask the same question, she said. When will it stop? It stops when truth stops being inconvenient. It stops when silence stops being the default. A journalist lowered his microphone slightly. Colonel Brooks, what will you do next? She looked at him, her expression unreadable. I will write a report, she said. Not about the officer, but about the culture that built him. Reeves's radio crackled again. Command requesting status update. Media presence confirmed. He replied calmly. Situation stable. Colonel Brooks is addressing civilians. Then, lowering his radio, he added softly, Ma'am, we can escort you whenever you are ready. Elena gave one final look at the gathered faces. Justice does not need a stage, she said. It just needs witnesses. Her words hung in the air like a closing note of a hymn. She walked to her vehicle, the same SUV that had started it all. The crowd parted instinctively, not out of fear, but respect. As she opened the door, she paused and glanced at the young female officer still standing nearby. Lieutenant Reeves will need your statement, she said gently. Tell the truth, not what they will want you to say. The officer nodded, tears slipping down her cheek. Yes, ma'am. The engine started with a low hum. The reporters moved aside. As Elena drove away, sunlight reflected off the hood, washing the street in a soft glow. Behind her, a city began to whisper about what it had witnessed, a kneeling that turned into standing, and a silence that spoke louder than any command. The footage spread faster than anyone could contain it. By nightfall, every major news network carried the same headline, Colonel Elena Brooks, detained by police during routine stop. Clips from bystanders flooded social media, different angles, different voices, one shared disbelief. In living rooms and phones across the nation, people replayed the moment when the officer shouted, "Get on your knees," and the calm, measured response that followed. For many, it was more than a headline. It was a mirror. Inside a quiet military base conference room, screens glowed with paused images of the event. Senior officials sat in silence. One of them, a general with silver hair, exhaled sharply. We have protocols for everything, he said. But not for this, another replied. She followed her training. She de-escalated without force. She upheld the code better than anyone out there. Meanwhile, in the city, Officer Grant sat alone in a holding room. His badge lay on the table beside a half-empty cup of water. He replayed the day in his mind, each moment heavier than the last. The humiliation of losing control, the echo of his own words, the crowd's reaction, it all twisted inside him. She made me look like a fool, he muttered under his breath, but even he no longer believed it. The truth had already stripped away his justifications. Elena Brooks sat at her desk that same evening, uniform jacket draped neatly over the chair. Her report glowed on the laptop screen, every word factual, devoid of emotion. Still, her reflection in the monitor showed the weight of the day, the exhaustion that comes not from battle, but from proving humanity in a uniformed world. She paused and whispered to herself, dignity should not need rank. Her phone buzzed. It was the young female officer. Ma'am, it is me, Officer Haley. Internal Affairs just called me for a statement. They want me to soften what happened. Elena's tone was calm. Do not soften the truth, she said. Polish it if you must, but never bury it. Haley exhaled on the other end. Thank you, ma'am. I will not. Oh. A notification blinked on Elena's screen, an email from command. Request for formal appearance before the Ethics Review Board. She closed her eyes for a moment. So it begins, she murmured. Then she looked out the window, where the city lights flickered against the darkness. Somewhere out there, a dozen strangers were still sharing her story, still debating, still feeling something shift. Back on social media, A teenage boy who had filmed the incident posted his final clip with a caption that read, "She did not raise her voice once, but she changed the volume of the world." Within hours, it had over 1 million views. In the quiet of her office, Colonel Elena Brooks folded her hands, the faint bruise from the handcuffs still visible on her wrist. It was not pain, it was proof. And though the world outside roared with opinions, she sat perfectly still, ready for what would come next. Because justice, she knew, was not a single moment. It was the echo that refused to fade. The next morning, the nation woke up divided. Talk shows argued over whether the officer had overreacted or whether Colonel Elena Brooks had used her rank to humiliate the police. Comment sections turned into battlefields of opinion. Some called her a hero, others called her a threat. But through the noise, one truth kept echoing. The video spoke louder than any argument. It was undeniable. It was real. Elena watched the coverage from her kitchen table, coffee untouched. The news anchor's voice played in the background. In an official statement, the department has confirmed that Officer Grant has been placed on immediate suspension pending investigation. Public pressure continues to grow. Her phone vibrated non-stop messages from soldiers, strangers, activists, even old friends she had not heard from in years. One text stood out. "You made every silent woman stand taller today." She smiled faintly but said nothing. At the same time, in a police headquarters across town, chaos ruled. The chief slammed a folder onto the table. He called her "you people on camera. We cannot recover from that," he said. A public relations officer whispered, "The mayor wants a meeting before noon. They are demanding accountability." The room was thick with panic, the kind that comes when truth cannot be spun anymore. Meanwhile, the young female officer, Haley, sat outside the Internal Affairs office, hands folded tight in her lap. A recorder blinked red in front of her. "State your name and position," the investigator said. "Officer Haley Thomas. Badge number 8712, she answered steadily. "Were you present when Colonel Brooks was detained?" "Yes." "Was the colonel cooperative?" Haley looked the man straight in the eye. She was composed, clear, and compliant. The only person who escalated the situation was Officer Grant. Silence filled the room. "Do you stand by that statement?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "Every word." Back at the base, Lieutenant Reeves entered Elena's office with a stack of papers. "The Ethics Review Board will meet tomorrow morning," he said. "They want your statement to be public." Elena leaned back in her chair. "Good," she replied. "Let transparency do what silence never could." He hesitated. "Ma'am, are you prepared for what this might become? Some will say you disrespected law enforcement." Elena looked at him evenly. "I respect the badge," she said. "I do not respect the abuse that hides behind it." Outside her window, reporters had already gathered at the gates, cameras waiting. The story was no longer just about an officer and a colonel. It had become something larger, a national reckoning wrapped in one woman's composure. As dusk settled that night, Elena opened her laptop once more. A new email waited at the top of her inbox subject line. "You made us believe again." It was unsigned, sent from an anonymous address. The message contained only one sentence. "You did not kneel for them, but you helped us all stand." Elena read it twice, then closed the laptop gently. Her eyes lingered on the quiet room. Justice was no longer a concept discussed in headlines. It was breathing, alive, and somewhere out there, it was learning to stand on its own 2 feet. The morning of the hearing arrived with heavy gray clouds hanging low over the city. The military convoy moved through the streets quietly, black sedans cutting through the mist with precision. Reporters lined the sidewalks outside the federal building, their cameras trained on the main entrance. When Colonel Elena Brooks stepped out of her vehicle, the crowd hushed as if the air itself had paused. She was not in her dress uniform this time. She wore a simple dark suit, no medals, no insignia, only purpose. Her stride was steady, her gaze unwavering. Inside the hearing chamber, the Ethics Review Board sat in a row behind long mahogany desks. The lead investigator, General Douglas, adjusted his glasses. "Colonel Brooks, thank you for appearing voluntarily," he said. "This is a review of the events from 48 hours ago and the actions that followed." Elena nodded once. "Understood, sir." The room was lined with press and observers, but it was silent enough to hear the soft hum of the fluorescent lights. A large monitor displayed still frames from the viral video. Her kneeling, the officer shouting, the arrival of the jeep. General Douglas gestured toward the screen. Colonel, do you confirm that this footage accurately represents the event as it occurred? Elena's voice was clear. Yes, General. Every frame. Did you identify yourself as an officer of the United States Army before or during the incident? He asked. No, she said. I did not have the chance. I was not asked who I was. I was told what to be. The room shifted, a quiet murmur breaking through before the general raised his hand. He leaned forward slightly. You understand that your decision to activate an emergency signal initiated a federal response protocol, correct? I do, Elena replied. And I stand by that decision. The signal is designed for imminent threat or unlawful detainment of an officer. Both applied. A civilian member of the board, a woman in a gray blazer, spoke next. Colonel Brooks, the public has praised you, but some accuse you of using your authority to humiliate the police. What is your response? Elena's expression remained calm. Authority without accountability is not authority, it is arrogance, she said. I did not humiliate anyone. I revealed what happens when power forgets responsibility. The silence that followed was almost reverent. The general tapped his pen once against the desk. Final question, Colonel. What would you want the American public to take from what happened that day? Elena took a breath, her voice lowering slightly. That justice is not an institution, it is an action. That respect cannot be demanded with volume. It must be earned through restraint. And that a uniform, any uniform, should remind us whom we serve, not who must serve us. The board members exchanged glances. General Douglas closed his file. That will be all for now, Colonel. You may step outside while we deliberate. As Elena rose and turned toward the door, the reporters surged forward, flashes lighting the hallway. She did not look away or cover her face. She simply said, If you tell my story, tell it whole. Do not cut the silence out. That was the loudest part. And with that, she walked past the noise, her calm heavier than any headline that would follow. Inside the chamber, the hallway was packed with voices that collided like waves, reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing, the echo of polished shoes against marble floors. Colonel Elena Brooks walked straight through the noise, her posture unbroken, her silence louder than any statement. Lieutenant Reeves followed a few steps behind, phone pressed to his ear, murmuring updates to command. Elena, over here, a journalist called out. Do you feel vindicated? Another shouted. She paused only once, turned slightly toward the crowd and said evenly, This was never about vindication, it was about visibility. Then she moved on. In the press room across the hall, screens displayed live coverage of the hearing. Commentators debated her every word, dissecting tone, expression, and motive. On one split screen, a retired police chief said, She handled herself better than any officer I have seen. On the other, a political commentator replied, Maybe, but it sets a dangerous precedent for public trust. The argument raged, but the video of her calm testimony replayed quietly in the corner, untouched by opinion. Inside a smaller briefing room, Haley sat at a table waiting for her own review session. When Elena entered, the younger woman stood at attention out of instinct. Elena gestured gently. At ease, officer. Haley hesitated. Ma'am, they keep asking if you were confrontational before the camera started. I told them the truth, but they look for cracks that do not exist. Elena smiled faintly. Let them look. The truth does not crack. It reflects. Moments later, Lieutenant Reeves stepped in holding his tablet. Ma'am, the board's decision will be announced in 30 minutes, he said. They are preparing a joint statement with the Department of Justice. Elena gave a slow nod. Then we wait. She sat beside the window, watching the slow drift of clouds outside. Do you ever notice, she said softly, how storms look calm before they break? Reeves answered, Yes, ma'am, but sometimes calm is the storm. Across town, Officer Grant watched the coverage from a private room in Internal Affairs. His hands fidgeted, restless, as the anchor read the latest update. Public sentiment continues to shift toward support for Colonel Brooks, the anchor said. Grant's reflection in the television screen looked smaller than he remembered. For the first time, he realized the power he had once believed unshakable was never his to begin with. Back at the federal building, an aide entered the waiting area and handed Elena a small, sealed envelope. The board has concluded deliberations, he said. They request your presence. Elena stood, adjusted her jacket, and turned to Haley and Reeves. "Whatever they say, remember this," she said quietly. The goal was never to win. The goal was to reveal. The heavy doors opened again. Reporters leaned forward, cameras ready. The air carried the tension of a country holding its breath. Elena Brooks stepped through, every stride deliberate. The world had watched her kneel, had watched her stand, and now it would watch what came next. The chamber lights dimmed as she took her seat once more. General Douglas looked up from his papers and spoke into the microphone, his voice clear and solemn. "After review of all testimony, evidence, and public record, this board finds Colonel Elena Brooks acted within full authority and professional conduct under the laws of the United States." The room erupted in murmurs. Cameras flashed. Outside, the crowd began to cheer. Elena sat still, absorbing the sound without triumph. Justice, she knew, was never a celebration, it was a correction. The decision spread through the corridors like electricity. Reporters raced to file their stories. Military aides exchanged quick nods, and the sound of applause drifted in from the street below. For the first time in 2 days, Colonel Elena Brooks exhaled fully. It was not relief. It was release. She rose from her chair, smoothed her suit, and faced the board. "Thank you for recognizing truth," she said. "But remember, it should not take a viral video to see it." General Douglas stood as well. "Colonel, you have conducted yourself with honor. The department will issue an official commendation." She met his eyes steadily. "Respectfully, sir, keep the commendation. Give me reform." He blinked, caught off guard, but then nodded slowly. "Understood." Oh, outside, the sunlight broke through the gray clouds. A crowd had gathered behind security barricades, holding signs that read, "Justice does not kneel and dignity has no rank." When Elena stepped out of the building, they erupted into cheers. The sound rolled through the plaza like thunder, but her expression remained calm. She raised a hand briefly in acknowledgement, not as a gesture of victory, but of solidarity. Lieutenant Reeves and Officer Haley followed close behind. "Ma'am," Reeves said quietly, "Command wants to arrange a press briefing." Elena shook her head. "No statements today. Let the people speak first." She walked to the center of the steps where she had entered that morning and paused, scanning the crowd. A teenage boy pushed forward from behind the barricade, holding up his phone. "Colonel Brooks," he called. "Do you remember me? I filmed that day." She smiled gently. "Yes. You told the world what it refused to see." The boy grinned, overwhelmed. "It changed everything." Elena's tone softened. "Then make sure it keeps changing. Keep recording. Keep questioning." Officer Haley's voice trembled behind her. "Ma'am, do you think they will listen?" Elena turned slightly, her eyes thoughtful. "They are listening now," she said. "The question is whether they will hear." From the other side of the plaza, a woman stepped forward holding a small American flag. "Thank you for standing for us," she shouted. Elena met her gaze. "I stood because too many before me could not," she answered. At that moment, the city's bells began to ring from a nearby church tower. The deep, resonant sound filled the air, mingling with the crowd's applause. Elena looked up toward the sky. "That sound," she said quietly to Reeves, "is not celebration. It is awakening." Reeves nodded. "And what will you do now, ma'am?" She smiled faintly. "Return to duty. There is still work to be done." As she descended the marble steps, cameras captured every movement, but none could capture what mattered most: the calm in her face, the power in her stillness, the certainty that this was more than vindication. It was a turning point. Somewhere behind her, a reporter's voice carried over the noise. "Colonel Brooks, any final message for the country?" Elena stopped, turned once more to face the crowd, and said, "Do not wait for justice to arrive in uniform. Build it where you stand." The cheers that followed were not for a hero. They were for a mirror that finally showed America its reflection. The following morning, the city felt different. The noise of traffic sounded lighter. Conversations on sidewalks carried a tone of reflection instead of outrage. The footage from the hearing replayed on screens across America. Commentators were quieter now, measured, as if even they understood that something larger than a single incident had taken place. Colonel Elena Brooks stood at the window of her office overlooking the base courtyard. Soldiers were beginning their morning drills, the rhythm of boots on asphalt steady and sure. The scene below was ordinary, but after everything that had happened, even ordinary looked sacred. Lieutenant Reeves entered with a folder in hand. "Ma'am," he said. Messages continue to arrive from all over the country. Letters, emails, calls, some from veterans, some from mothers, some from officers who said they are rethinking everything. Elena nodded, her gaze still on the soldiers below. Good, she said quietly. Change should not end when the cameras do. Reeves hesitated before speaking again. There is one more thing. Officer Haley requested reassignment to the training division. She says she wants to rewrite their bias protocols. Elena turned to him, a faint smile on her lips. That is where true reform begins, she replied. The base commander stepped in next, saluting sharply. Colonel Brooks, the Secretary of Defense would like to commend you personally. He called this incident a defining example of integrity under pressure. She shook her head gently. Integrity is only meaningful if it becomes policy. Tell him I would rather have prevention than praise. The commander nodded, visibly moved, and left the room without another word. Elena walked back to her desk, the morning sunlight catching the faint scar on her wrist where the cuffs had been. She traced it lightly with her thumb, not a mark of shame, but of survival. The phone on her desk buzzed. It was an unknown number. She answered. Colonel Brooks? A woman's voice asked softly. Yes, speaking. My name is Lila Anderson. My son was watching your video with me. He is 8. When you stood up that day, he looked at me and said, Mom, she looks like me. I just wanted to say thank you. Elena closed her eyes briefly, her voice steady. Thank you, Mrs. Anderson. Tell your son he does not need a uniform to have power. He only needs to remember his worth. After the call ended, she stepped outside into the crisp morning air. The flag above the courtyard stirred gently in the breeze. Soldiers looked up as she passed, their salutes crisp, their expressions solemn. Yet behind their formality, there was admiration deep, quiet, and earned. She stopped at the center of the courtyard, where sunlight spilled across the concrete like a spotlight. Turning to Reeves, she spoke the final words that would echo far beyond the base. Power should never humiliate, she said. It should illuminate. Then, after a long pause, she added, I did not need to raise my voice that day because justice already had one. It just needed to be heard. The wind picked up, carrying her words beyond the gates, beyond the city, into every place where silence still lingered. And as she walked away, the camera that caught her last steps focused not on the medals or the rank on her shoulder, but on the unshakable calm of a woman who had made an entire system kneel not through anger, but through grace.